The Echo of Regret. Part 3. The Echo of Regret. Part 3. Description. Vanessa, the architect of vengeance, has ascended. From the ashes of Lawrence Hubbard's empire and the calculated demise of Jeff Young, she now commands a fortune beyond measure and a network of influence that spans the globe. But her hunger is insatiable. The game has evolved from personal vendetta to global conquest, and Vanessa, the queen of her self-made throne, is ready to play. For a decade, she meticulously cultivates her inner circle, a judge ensnared by debt, a prosecutor swayed by idealism, a district attorney blinded by ambition, and lawyers who weaponize the law. She infiltrates law enforcement, intelligence agencies, and military ranks, recruiting a formidable team of specialists, from a Navy SEAL to a fighter pilot, each bound to her by a loyalty forged in compromise and transgression. These are not mere pawns. They are extensions of her will, instruments of a grand design to dismantle the existing world order. As Christmas Day, 2036, dawns, the world unknowingly stands on the precipice of an unprecedented transformation. Vanessa's plan, a symphony of precision and psychological warfare, is set to create a power vacuum so absolute that nations will clamor for a new leader. With an iron fist, she will unite countries, control currencies, and rule with total dominance, ensuring her legacy of absolute control. But even as she reigns supreme, the seeds of her own destruction are sown, waiting for the opportune moment to sprout. The Echo of Regret. Part 3. The world, still reeling from the twin shocks of Lawrence Hubbard's demise and the subsequent, equally dramatic, passing of Jeff Young, believed it understood the narrative. A greedy maid, a tragic accident, simple, digestible truths for a populace that preferred its villains and victims clearly defined. But in the gilded cage of her newly expanded empire, Vanessa knew the truth was far more intricate, far more chilling. She was not merely a woman of immense wealth. She was a sculptor of chaos, a maestro of manipulation, and the architect of a future where the world would dance to her tune. Her hunger, once a gnawing void born of vengeance, had transformed into an insatiable, almost divine ambition. The billions she commanded were not an end, but a means to an end, absolute, unyielding control. She had tasted power, and it was a vintage she craved above all else. The game had evolved from personal vendetta to global conquest, and Vanessa, the queen of her self-made throne, was ready to play. The initial years following Jeff Young's death were a blur of consolidation and strategic acquisition. She absorbed his vast holdings, streamlining his diverse portfolio into her own burgeoning conglomerate. Legal teams, handpicked for their ruthlessness and discretion, worked tirelessly to untangle the complexities of international finance, ensuring every asset, every offshore account, every hidden trust flowed seamlessly into Vanessa's coffers. She moved with the silent precision of a predator, her every decision calculated, every move a step closer to her ultimate goal. But wealth alone was insufficient. True power, Vanessa understood, lay in influence, in the ability to orchestrate events from the shadows, to pull the strings of nations without ever stepping into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Her vision was audacious, a tapestry woven from the threads of global instability and human weakness. She would dismantle the existing world order, not with bombs and bullets, but with whispers and carefully placed pawns. She would create a power vacuum so profound, so disorienting, that the world would clamor for a new leader, a new system. And when that moment arrived, Vanessa would be there, her hand extended, ready to seize the reins. Her first task was to assemble her inner circle, a team of unparalleled expertise and unwavering loyalty. These would not be mere employees or subordinates. They would be extensions of her will, instruments of her grand design. The recruitment process was a decade-long odyssey, a meticulous hunt for individuals whose skills were exceptional and whose moral compasses were either broken or easily swayed. She sought not just talent, but a certain malleability, a hunger for something only she could provide: power, absolution, or simply a chance to reshape the world in their own image. Her targets were diverse, spanning the highest echelons of law enforcement, judiciary, military, and finance. Each potential recruit was subjected to a rigorous, often terrifying, loyalty test. These were not crude interrogations or physical trials. They were psychological gauntlets, designed to expose their deepest fears, their hidden desires, and their breaking points. Vanessa believed that true loyalty was forged in the crucible of compromise, in the shared secret of transgression. Once they had crossed a line for her, once they had sacrificed their integrity or their past for her vision, they were hers. And failure, as she chillingly informed them, meant not just dismissal, but utter ruin, a professional and personal obliteration so complete, it might as well have been a death sentence. Her first major acquisition was a judge, a man named Arthur Finch. Finch was a respected figure, known for his stern demeanor and unwavering adherence to the letter of the law. But beneath the facade of judicial impartiality lay a secret, a crippling gambling addiction that had left him deeply indebted to a ruthless criminal syndicate. Vanessa, through her vast network of informants, uncovered his vulnerability. She didn't expose him. Instead, she offered him a lifeline, a discreet settlement of his debts, a clean slate, in exchange for his unwavering allegiance. His loyalty test was subtle, a series of seemingly innocuous rulings that, when viewed in aggregate, subtly shifted legal precedents in Vanessa's favor, creating loopholes and precedents that would later prove invaluable. He passed, his conscience a small price to pay for his freedom. Next came prosecutor Eleanor Vance, a woman with a formidable conviction rate and an unblemished public image. Vance, however, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards the political establishment, believing it to be corrupt and ineffective. Vanessa appealed to this idealism, painting a picture of a world cleansed of hypocrisy, a world where true justice could finally prevail. Vance's loyalty test involved deliberately sabotaging a high-profile case against a minor figure in Vanessa's burgeoning network, ensuring a mistrial and the quiet disappearance of incriminating evidence. The act gnawed at Vance's conscience, but the promise of a better world and Vanessa's chillingly persuasive arguments ultimately won her over. The district attorney, Marcus Thorne, was a man of immense political ambition, constantly eyeing higher office. Vanessa offered him an accelerated path to power, a guaranteed governorship, and eventually, a presidential nomination, all orchestrated through her vast financial and media influence. Thorne's loyalty test was a series of strategic decisions that weakened the local law enforcement infrastructure, diverting resources and creating bureaucratic bottlenecks that would later serve Vanessa's purposes. He saw it as a necessary evil, a temporary sacrifice for a greater good, unaware that he was merely a stepping stone in Vanessa's ascent. For the criminal defense lawyer, Julian Thorne, Vanessa sought a master of legal obfuscation, a man who could weave narratives of doubt and exploit every technicality. Julian, a brilliant but cynical lawyer, had grown disillusioned with a justice system he viewed as inherently flawed. Vanessa offered him the ultimate challenge, to dismantle the very foundations of that system, to expose its weaknesses and rebuild it according to a new, more efficient design. His loyalty test involved defending a series of individuals who, unbeknownst to him, were crucial operatives in Vanessa's network, ensuring their freedom through legal acrobatics and the strategic suppression of evidence. He reveled in the intellectual challenge, blind to the true implications of his victories. The civil suit attorney, Cassandra Hayes, was a sharp, aggressive litigator with a reputation for winning impossible cases. Vanessa needed someone who could weaponize civil law, using lawsuits and injunctions to cripple her opponents and seize their assets. Hayes, a woman driven by a desire to right perceived wrongs, was easily swayed by Vanessa's promises of a world free from corporate greed and political corruption. Her loyalty test involved orchestrating a series of devastating civil suits against rival corporations and political figures, effectively bankrupting them and transferring their influence into Vanessa's orbit. Hayes believed she was fighting for justice, unaware that she was merely clearing the path for a new, more formidable power. Recruiting within the police department required a different approach. Vanessa targeted Captain David Miller, a veteran officer with a spotless record but a deep-seated frustration with the systemic corruption he witnessed daily. Vanessa presented herself as a shadowy benefactor, offering him the resources and authority to truly clean up the force to implement reforms that had always been stifled by political interference. Miller's loyalty test involved turning a blind eye to certain minor infractions committed by Vanessa's operatives, small compromises that chipped away at his moral foundation, convincing him that the greater good justified these minor transgressions. For the FBI officer, Agent Sarah Chun, Vanessa exploited her ambition and her disillusionment with the bureaucracy of federal law enforcement. Chun was a brilliant investigator, but her career had been stalled by office politics and a rigid hierarchy. Vanessa offered her a direct line to intelligence, a bypass around the red tape, and the promise of solving cases that had baffled the agency for years. Chun's loyalty test involved subtly misdirecting investigations away from Vanessa's activities, planting false leads, and ensuring that critical information never reached the right hands. She believed she was fighting a more effective war against crime, unaware that she was merely a pawn in a much larger game. The CIA agent, Mark Jensen, was a master of espionage, a ghost in the shadows. Jensen was a patriot, but his patriotism had been twisted by years of covert operations and moral compromises. He believed the world was a dangerous place, and that only a strong, decisive hand could maintain order. Vanessa appealed to this belief, presenting herself as that decisive hand, a force capable of bringing true stability to a chaotic world. Jensen's loyalty test involved orchestrating a series of destabilizing events in minor, strategically important nations, creating the very chaos that Vanessa intended to exploit. He saw it as necessary groundwork, a painful but essential step towards a new world order. Recruiting a Coast Guard officer, Commander Elena Rodriguez, was a strategic move to control maritime routes and disrupt global trade. Rodriguez, a woman of unwavering discipline and a deep understanding of naval logistics, was frustrated by the limitations of her command, constantly battling budget cuts and political interference. Vanessa offered her unlimited resources, cutting-edge technology, and the authority to implement her vision for a truly secure global maritime network. Rodriguez's loyalty test involved orchestrating a series of seemingly accidental shipping delays and diversions, creating bottlenecks and shortages that subtly destabilized international markets, all while appearing to be routine operational issues. The Border Patrol agent, Javier Morales, was a man hardened by years on the front lines, witnessing the endless flow of illicit goods and desperate people. Morales believed that true security could only be achieved through absolute control of borders, a belief often at odds with humanitarian concerns. Vanessa appealed to his pragmatism, offering him the means to implement his most radical ideas for border security, promising a world free from the chaos he so despised. Morales's loyalty test involved facilitating the discreet passage of Vanessa's operatives and sensitive materials across international borders, bypassing conventional checkpoints and utilizing his intimate knowledge of clandestine routes. He justified his actions as necessary for a greater, more secure future. For the ATF agent, Specialist Ben Carter, Vanessa sought an expert in weapons trafficking and illicit arms. Carter, a man with a keen understanding of the global black market, was disillusioned by the endless cycle of violence and the futility of his efforts. Vanessa offered him a chance to truly disarm the world, to control the flow of weapons and prevent their proliferation. Carter's loyalty test involved providing Vanessa with detailed intelligence on rival arms dealers and their networks, allowing her to systematically dismantle their operations and consolidate control over the global arms trade. He believed he was contributing to a safer world, unaware that he was merely centralizing power in Vanessa's hands. The private investor, Alastair Finch, was a financial prodigy, a man who could foresee market shifts and manipulate them to his advantage. Finch was driven by an insatiable desire for wealth and influence, but also by a profound boredom with the conventional financial world. Vanessa offered him the ultimate game, to reshape the global economy, to create and destroy fortunes on an unprecedented scale. Finch's loyalty test involved orchestrating a series of complex financial maneuvers that destabilized national currencies and stock markets, creating economic turmoil that Vanessa would later exploit. He reveled in the intellectual challenge, the sheer audacity of the plan, and the unimaginable profits it promised. Finally, Vanessa turned her attention to the military. understanding that ultimate control required ultimate force. She sought not just soldiers, but strategists, tacticians, and specialists capable of executing her most daring plans. She recruited 5 high-ranking officers, each a legend in their own right. First, a Navy SEAL, Commander Anya Sharma. Sharma was a warrior of unparalleled skill and courage, but she carried the weight of countless morally ambiguous missions, a deep-seated weariness with the political machinations that often dictated military action. Vanessa offered her a chance to fight for a cause she truly believed in, a unified world, free from the petty squabbles of nations. Sharma's loyalty test involved leading a series of highly classified training exercises that, unbeknownst to her, were designed to test the vulnerabilities of key global infrastructure, providing Vanessa with invaluable intelligence for future operations. She believed she was preparing for a new era of global peacekeeping. Next, a Green Beret, Colonel Ethan Vance. Vance was a master of unconventional warfare, a man who understood the art of insurgency and counterinsurgency. He was a pragmatist, believing that the ends often justified the means. Vanessa appealed to his strategic mind, offering him the opportunity to implement a truly global security doctrine, one that transcended national borders and political allegiances. Vance's loyalty test involved orchestrating a series of covert operations in politically volatile regions, subtly shifting power dynamics, and creating localized conflicts that would later serve Vanessa's broader agenda. He saw himself as a necessary evil, a force for order in a chaotic world. The sniper, Major Kai Tanaka, was a ghost, a silent killer whose precision was legendary. Tanaka was a man of few words, driven by a cold, unwavering sense of duty. He had seen the horrors of war firsthand and believed that decisive action, however brutal, was sometimes necessary to prevent greater suffering. Vanessa offered him the ultimate target, the architects of global discord, the leaders who perpetuated division and conflict. Tanaka's loyalty test involved eliminating a series of high-value targets, individuals who, according to Vanessa's carefully constructed narratives, were obstacles to global peace. He executed his missions with chilling efficiency, believing he was purging the world of its cancers. For the hand-to-hand combat army officer, Captain Lena Petrova, Vanessa sought a master of close-quarters combat, a woman whose physical prowess was matched only by her strategic mind. Petrova was a survivor, a woman who had risen through the ranks through sheer determination and an unyielding will. Vanessa offered her the opportunity to train an elite personal guard, a force loyal only to Vanessa, capable of protecting her vision against any threat. Petrova's loyalty test involved designing and implementing a brutal training regimen for Vanessa's nascent security forces, instilling in them an absolute obedience and a fanatical devotion to their leader. She relished the challenge, forging an army in her own image. Finally, the fighter jet pilot, Colonel Alex "Maverick" Riley, was a legend in the skies, a pilot whose skill and daring were unmatched. Riley was a thrill-seeker, a man who lived for the rush of adrenaline and the challenge of pushing boundaries. Vanessa offered him the ultimate playground, control of a private air force, equipped with the most advanced aircraft, capable of projecting power anywhere in the world. Riley's loyalty test involved conducting a series of unauthorized, high-altitude reconnaissance missions over sensitive international airspace, gathering intelligence that would be crucial for Vanessa's strategic planning. He saw it as the ultimate test of his abilities, a chance to rewrite the rules of aerial warfare. With her team meticulously assembled, Vanessa's focus shifted to the grand execution. The year was 2036, and the world was unknowingly hurtling towards a Christmas day that would forever alter the course of history. 10 years of patient planning, billions of dollars invested, and countless lives subtly manipulated had brought her to this precipice. Her appetite for power was not merely egregious, it was cosmic, a force that bent reality to its will. She was the richest woman who ever lived, the most powerful, the most dominant, and the most influential. Her legacy, she knew, would be etched into the annals of time, not as a conqueror, but as the unifier of nations, the silent queen of a new world order. Her plan was a symphony of precision and psychological warfare, designed to create a global panic and a power vacuum so absolute that the world would willingly surrender to her leadership. The targets were the five pillars of global power: the President of the United States, the President of China, the President of Russia, the Saudi Prince, and the King of England. Not through crude assassination, but through a meticulously orchestrated series of events that would inflict profound pain and suffering, eroding their authority and legitimacy, making their removal a perceived necessity for global stability. Each leader would face a unique, deeply personal torment, tailored to their greatest vulnerabilities, orchestrated by Vanessa's specialized team. The judge would subtly undermine their legal standing, creating a labyrinth of international indictments and sanctions. The prosecutors and district attorneys would launch investigations into fabricated financial improprieties, creating a media firestorm that would erode public trust. The defense lawyers would ensure that any attempts to counter these narratives would be met with legal gridlock and public skepticism. The civil suit attorneys would unleash a barrage of lawsuits, tying up their assets and further destabilizing their regimes. The police department, under Captain Miller's subtle influence, would be directed to ignore critical intelligence, allowing small, localized crises to escalate, creating a sense of governmental incompetence. Agent Chun of the FBI would ensure that any genuine threats to Vanessa's plan were misdirected or buried in bureaucratic red tape. Mark Jensen, the CIA agent, would orchestrate a series of covert operations that would sow discord and distrust within the leaders' inner circles, turning allies against each other. Commander Rodriguez of the Coast Guard would subtly disrupt supply chains, creating economic pressure and public unrest. Agent Morales of Border Patrol would facilitate the movement of Vanessa's assets and operatives, ensuring seamless execution across international boundaries. Specialist Carter of the ATF would ensure that any attempts by loyalist forces to arm themselves were met with logistical nightmares and equipment failures. And then, the military specialists. Commander Sharma, the Navy SEAL, would oversee the strategic placement of Vanessa's covert assets, ensuring that every piece of the puzzle was in its precise location. Colonel Vance, the Green Beret, would manage the psychological operations, crafting narratives of fear and uncertainty that would paralyze populations and governments alike. Major Tanaka, the Sniper, would be responsible for the precise, surgical removal of key figures who might attempt to rally resistance, not through overt violence, but through carefully staged accidents or disappearances that would send chilling messages without leaving a trace. Captain Petrova, the hand-to-hand combat army officer, would lead Vanessa's elite personal guard, a silent, unseen force ready to neutralize any direct threat to Vanessa or her operations. And Colonel Riley, the fighter jet pilot, would command a fleet of drones and advanced aircraft, conducting surveillance and, if necessary, executing precision strikes against critical infrastructure, further destabilizing the targeted nations. The loyalty tests for these elite operatives were not one-time events, but ongoing processes, a constant reaffirmation of their commitment to Vanessa's vision. Each success, each compromise, each act of betrayal against their former allegiances deepened their indoctrination, binding them irrevocably to her. They were rewarded handsomely, not just with wealth, but with a sense of purpose, a belief that they were part of something greater than themselves, reshaping the world for a new, more ordered future. They saw themselves as revolutionaries, not puppets. As Christmas Day, 2036, dawned, the world was a powder keg, primed for detonation. The global stage was set, the players in position, and Vanessa, from her command center, a fortress of technology and intellect, watched with a cold, triumphant smile. The first domino was about to fall, and with it, the old world order. Her plan, 10 years in the making, was executing flawlessly. The pain and suffering she intended to inflict upon the world's leaders would be a spectacle, a warning, and a testament to her absolute power. The world would be left without its leaders, a void that only she could fill, positioning her people, her team, as the new architects of global governance. She would run and pull the strings of all nations behind the scenes, dominating the weak and her enemies with full, total control to run the world as she saw fit, to run all countries, currencies, and unite each nation together, and run it with an iron fist, building elite military forces, crushing anyone that opposed them, and making sure everyone was loyal within the ranks, so she could dominate and rule forever. Her legacy would be one of absolute control, a world remade in her image. And once her dominion was complete, once the world was hers, she would turn her attention to the next phase of her grand design, a family. She would have many children, but remain unmarried, without a male significant other, ensuring that her legacy, her power, her wealth, and her influence would pass directly to her progeny, untainted by external influence. For she was the greatest of all in the whole entire world. The world held its breath, unaware of the silent, invisible hand that was about to plunge it into an unprecedented era of change. The echo of regret, once a personal lament, was about to become a global symphony, a prelude to a new dawn, or perhaps a new darkness. The stage was set for part 4, for what comes up must come down. The seeds of her destruction, her downfall, and her untimely death were already sown, waiting for the opportune moment to sprout. But for now, Vanessa reigned supreme, the undisputed queen of a world on the brink of transformation. End of part 3. About the author, Michael Anthony Neal Jr. Michael Anthony Neal Jr. is a multifaceted artist and entrepreneur, a true force in the creative world. Hailing from Marina, California, and now residing in the vibrant city of Seattle, Washington, Michael is an established author who fearlessly explores all genres, captivating readers with his diverse storytelling. Beyond the written word, he is a talented musician, artist, and songwriter, crafting compelling music that resonates with audiences. Michael's entrepreneurial spirit shines through his ownership of Thrilla Productions, a dynamic production and publishing company, and Hoodies by Design, a unique clothing and accessory business. It is the profound love for what he does that fuels his relentless drive, allowing him to seamlessly juggle the demands of writing and publishing books, creating and publishing music, and running his thriving businesses. For Michael, this isn't just work, it's his passion, his dream life realized.